everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bollywood Cinema Club. I am the host of the Culture Cast, Chris Stachiu, and I am here to talk about Indian cinema, past and present, and why you should be watching it. On this episode, I am joined once again by my good friend, writer of such films as Under Siege 2, The Mothman Prophecies, and he's also currently an executive producer and writer on DC Titans, which you can find on HBO Max, seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4, possibly the whole thing, but maybe just part 1. Your friend and mine, Richard Haddam.
Funny guy.
He's a funny guy, this one. Oh my God. On this episode of the Bollywood Cinema Club, we're actually, if this is the first time you're listening to Richard and I, this is the second episode that we're doing because we already talked about Dhoom 1. So we're going to be talking about 2006's Sanjay Gadhvi directed Dhoom 2. So Dhoom 2 stars Hrithik Roshan, Abhishek Bachchan, Aishwarya Rai, Bipasha Basu, and Uday Chopra, and the film is centered once again around Abhishek Bachchan and Uday Chopra as Jai Dixit and Ali Akbar Fateh Khan, a cop and his now, I guess, cop buddy, who are once again tasked with taking down a no-good, nasty thief. This time, not so no-good, not so nasty, very, very sexy. I think I found my Indian man crush. My God. Hrithik Roshan plays Aryan Singhania, otherwise known as Mr. A, and he is going around the world stealing things and also doing a little weird. We're gonna make an A on. It's a whole thing. We're gonna make an A on the map. It's very goofy. And along the way, Aishwarya Rai plays Sunhri Mitra, a woman with a past who Jai Dixit brings in to help him catch Mr. A. So, Richard, we watched Dhoom 1 together not too long ago.
Yeah, we did. It was good.
Yeah, it was pretty good, right? Tell me a little bit about what you thought sitting down to watch Dhoom 2.
I was really excited about it because the first one was so much fun. And I was just like, okay, so how can this one be any less fun? And it was even more fun. Watching these movies is like, it's just like eating ice cream. You know, there's no downside. You're not trying to figure things out. You're not like, wait, what's going on? Like I had to figure a few things out, but only because I didn't remember, probably because I don't recognize these people as the stars that they are. So I'm still like, so this character is also the one who is singing and dancing, because that's my big disconnect. They'll be having a dramatic scene, and then suddenly those same characters are in a giant musical number, and I'm like, well, that would never happen in an American film. So are we introducing a new character who's a pop star? No, we're just watching these characters do their thing. And then it's like, okay, right. Don't forget, it's Bollywood.
But to be fair, in the last movie, one of the characters was a pop star. So,
well, I know, yeah, that was
that may have been the problem. To be fair,
right? But wow, what about that sexy lady on the floor? I tell you that Aishwarya Rai Bachchan, by the way, you can't forget that she's married to Abhishek.
Rightfully so. I mean, obviously, Abhishek Bachchan is the son of Amitabh Bachchan, Big B, as he's referred to in Indian cinema, for good reason. It's funny. Abhishek Bachchan, and you've seen an Amitabh Bachchan film. We watched Sholay together, which he was one of the leads in. I don't want to say he does a great job evoking his dad, but he does a really good job at evoking his dad. I mean, he looks a lot like him. He carries himself the same way. And just like in the last movie, he's a great foil to our main character, who's the villain. In this movie, the main character is the thief. Not really a villain. It's right. It's an interesting way of telling the story. They did it in the first movie, I think, not as well as in this movie. I think this movie is a superior film to the first one in almost every way.
Well, it was interesting because it's 2.5 hours, and at a certain point, I was entertained throughout. There really aren't boring parts, but at a certain point, I went, I bet if I put this film right next to the first one, I think there were more action sequences in the first one.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
And more musical numbers in the second one, which I have no problem with whatsoever. I mean, I enjoy them both, but at a certain point, I'm like, I think if we're dividing it up, I think this one we've got more music, more dance numbers, more of that, and frankly, excuse me, almost with more drama. And it's what you're referring to. It's Rafik Roshan, okay, and Ashwara Rai. All right, who play Mr. A, and her sort of code name is Suneri. So they, again, as the movie goes on, it's like, oh, we are spending more and more time focusing on the ins and outs of this relationship. And at first, it's like they keep revealing what it is. First, it appears to be a happenstance meeting. Then it turns into a partnership. Then you learn that it's actually a setup by Jay, and so they keep turning cards, and really that's the story you end up watching. There really isn't like an emotional story at stake for the two main stars, those two guys, the cop and the criminal cop.
Now now they're both cops.
Yeah, well,
which is great. I mean, it totally works. I'm glad that we have some character growth in between the movies that we don't need to see on screen.
But Jay now is just a cop who uses criminals as spare cops to get done what he needs to get
isn't
done.
that what he did in the first movie?
It's exactly what he did. So when that plot thing happens and you're sort of like, wait, what? Immediately you're like, oh, well, that's what he did with Ali. So that's okay. This is what he does. It's like, okay, I've caught you. Now you've got two choices. Either, we imprison you, or you can help me out. Help me get a bigger fish.
Or you're a stoolie, Sammy the Bull Gravano style. Like, you're just gonna, which is it an issue that they kind of went back to the well in this movie with that? No, because they do something, again, I think inherently more interesting with it. In the first movie, you had Ali infiltrating the group and then kind of, not knowing if he's a double or a triple agent even. And that's, we got shades of the Chow Yun-Fat movie. A Better Tomorrow. It had like kind of vibes of that, and this movie doesn't. This is at its core. It's kind of a romance in a way. A lot of the second and third act, not so much the first act, because the first act we don't really meet Aishwarya Rai's Sunira. She's not there. She shows up towards the end of the first act, and then the second and third act, it's kind of her and Mr. A back and forth. But I think for me, the thing that does work better is, to your point, now that we have Jai and Ali established, we don't have to spend all of our time with them. We can have them in the movie. They can be a big part of the movie, but they're not the focus of the movie.
Right. And it was funny because so in the first act, you've got Bipasha Basu playing Shonali, the old college friend of Jay. And so for a minute, like in the first act, they're sort of telling you, oh, the story is that, his wife, Sweetie, who's pregnant, is getting jealous of this old college friend who's now also a cop. And Jay is spending all of his time with her, and Ali is afraid that he's going to have an affair. And you're never really worried, but it's kind of fun. And my God, the people in this film are so good looking.
Oh, right.
It made me angry at a certain point. Like, I almost can't take that much good looking. It's like, please bring some ugly people on screen. It's like, I can't handle any more of this. She is gorgeous and so great and so much fun. And I really enjoyed that. And then you get to a certain point in the movie where she kind of injures her foot and then she's gone. And then they go to Rio and then she shows up again playing her own sister, Monali. And that's a whole other thing. And she's great in that too. But I'm like, oh, are they going to switch back and forth? And now we're going to get, maybe both of them, or we're going to do that thing. But we never do. It's like, nope, first half of the movie on this character, second half of the movie on that character. And at a certain point, I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with that.
Well, and it also gives Ali finally a romantic interest in the movie, which they kind of, with Sweetie in the first movie, they kind of dance around that. And then Sweetie obviously becomes Jai Dixit's wife, and then his baby mama. She's pregnant with his child. So she's effectively a cameo in this movie. Yeah. It's called a special appearance, but it's effectively a cameo. She's in like, what, 2 scenes maybe?
The way I think of it is, they shot her out in 2 days.
Yeah, which is fine. That's the thing. Like, I don't need any more of that story. That's what's interesting. Yeah. Looking at this is the first sequel that I've watched in any Indian cinema film. First proper sequel Everything else I've watched has been, DDLJ's spiritual sequel is Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, same actors, similar rom-com thing, but different plot. They're playing different characters, but it's still the main actors together on screen. So spiritual sequel to the original movie. This is a proper sequel. They're playing the same characters, but the villain doesn't return. Kabir Sharma doesn't come back in this movie, which I'm okay with. John Abraham, the actor from the last movie, he's great, but Hrithik Roshan is just so goddamn charismatic. I've seen him in KKKG earlier this year, which is a fantastic kind of rom-com family drama adjacent movie. I'm going to say all these movies are worth checking out, but he is really good in that as the kind of put upon brother who's trying to pull the family back together. And then when he shows up in this, he is just...
It's amazing.
Yeah, he's fantastic because he's not really a villain. Like, he's set up to be the thief, the villain of the film, but there's no way you could side against him. There's no characters in this movie that you're supposed to dislike. They're all written rather charmingly, even when they're not trying to be.
Yeah, it is sort of like he doesn't kill anyone. He's not a killer. And they established pretty early on, it's like he's a very good thief. He steals, that's it. So we're up against, it's more of a chess game. It's not like, okay, these are truly bad people who need to be stopped. And no matter what, we got to stop them. They do a little bit of like when they're chasing him, Ali and even Jay, in the various scenes where it's like, okay, you've just pulled off this crime and we're trying to stop you. They're shooting at him. Like they're firing live rounds at this guy. They could easily kill him. But at one point, Shonali, she's practicing down at the gun range, because she's the best shot in the world, clearly. And she's like, this bullet travels 3,000 feet a second. No man can run that fast. Why don't you just do that? And he's like, I'm not about killing people. It's like, really? Because you and Ali are shooting at him an awful lot. But okay, whatever. But I get it. I mean, I'm glad. I like that distinction. And I think that's important. In a movie like this, I really like it when people have rules. Like, no, our rule is we want to capture him, not kill him. Because then it helps you become active in the movie because now you know the rules. Now you're watching to see if they break the rules. What are the consequences if they break the rules? So that's all great. But then later in the movie, in a scene where Jay and so the character's name is Mr. A is Aryan. And it's spelled Aryan like the Aryan race, which is a little weird, but okay, I'll go there. But in the scene where they're talking to each other, Jay is like, gee, I hope I don't have to kill you. And then I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Is he just bullshitting or is this back on the table? Like, is this going to be a thing? This is a movie where killing someone or not killing someone, being willing to kill someone or kill yourself becomes weirdly primary, especially down into the second half of the movie.
Well, and that was the thing. I mean, if you remember the end of the first movie, you have the Kabir character, killing himself by jumping off of the waterfall with the motorcycle, which again, I mean, they even ape it in this movie. And they go in this movie where I think you and I both assumed as Westerners, given what we've been kind of conditioned by Western media to assume that if they make a sequel, the guy jumps off the waterfall, but he survived miraculously because you didn't see a body and he would come back for the second movie. No, he's dead. I'm trying to remember in the first movie, were there people like who gets shot? Because they're killing guys at the beginning of the movie. At the beginning of this movie, when we're introduced to Ali and Jai, they murder like 15 or 20 guys in kind of hilarious slow-mo fashion where they're standing up and shooting at people, like just leaving themselves hyper exposed.
Ali is shooting these guys like they're tin cans on a fence.
Yeah.
He's just picking them off. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing that, Right. But the other thing is that, and maybe again, this is the way, I'm watching movies and I'm still trying to sort of learn the sort of the customs of the Bollywood film, one of which is all bets are off at all times. Anything can happen. It's like, if we state something as a rule early on, does not mean we are following that rule later. Literally, new scene, everything, the deck is reshuffled and anything can happen, which, look, for a movie of this kind, which isn't really asking you to invest too hard emotionally, if they're switching around a lot on how we are to understand the realism of any given situation, it doesn't matter. We're just in it for a good time, and it is a good time.
Well, and that's kind of where my kind of overarching opinion for this movie, kind of comes in. I've watched now a fair amount of Indian action films, and this is one of them. And this is an Indian kind of cop action movie as opposed to a fantasy action movie like Brahmastra or a period action piece with fantasy elements like Triple R. And, those movies or Bahubali even, which is kind of a mix of all three. It's interesting. This one really is. I would say it's inspired by, and I think you would agree, a lot of Western and Hong Kong cinema. I mean, again, it's similar to the first movie, but like you've mentioned, it does really let the action take a back seat in an interesting way. Like the first movie was such an action movie, and in a lot of ways, this one isn't. But that's what makes it interesting, is that since we do have these characters established and we're getting new characters being introduced to us that are being fully fleshed out, I kind of don't mind that it's missing the action. I feel like if I were watching a Marvel movie or Bad Boys and there wasn't action every 10 minutes, I'd be disappointed. Here I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not either. I think one reason is because, again, we're dealing with a bad guy who is not leaving a body count behind him. So we sort of feel like, well, okay, we're watching a bit more of a chess match. But the other thing is, every minute is so packed with style visually and in the sound design that even scenes where two people are sitting at a table talking feel amped up in a way. It doesn't like just drop into real life and then go into a heightened reality for action. Everything is heightened. And the style of the movie, the director's touch, is apparent every single second. At no point do you forget that you're watching a movie that has been constructed for visceral impact at every turn. Just weird sound effects and music and audio stings for various lines. And that's just the sound design. And then we're pushing in on people and we're getting these long lens close-ups and a scene between Aryan and Suneri is on a basketball court in the pouring rain with bright lights. They're just talking. It's 4 pages of dialogue. But it's like, well, we can't just have that. So it's got to look like a music video crossed with a beer commercial, crossed with I don't know what. And that's what it does look like. And so the entire time you're watching, you're like, well, is someone going to get shot maybe? Or like, what's really happening here? But it feels like, well, something's happening because there is 75 million gallons of rain falling on these people. So, and they're just standing there. Like nothing is realistic. So you never know what's going to happen.
Well, and I agree with you, obviously, with a lot of these kind of things that the movie has in it. Like a lot of these scenes are just, it's the next logical step beyond where it is in Western media, is what it feels like. It feels like in a Western action movie, they give you those moments of kind of a lull to catch your breath. I didn't feel that way in this movie.
Well, it's the lull. It's something that bothers me so much about Western filmmaking and American filmmaking, especially, is that like with the worst offender are the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, where there is an effort. It's an exhausting effort, but it's almost like it has to be there to convince the audience that this is A, serious, dead serious, and B, plausible. Now, we all understand that the things that happen in James Bond movies are not plausible, but so much time is spent explaining this, computer program or explaining this weird criminal enterprise that isn't interesting, is not compelling. You don't buy. It's not presented in any other way than to get this weird credibility. Like we're not just a Roger Moore stupid James Bond movie. This is real movie making. We're like the Bourne Identity or something. And it's like, and I don't care. That's not what I go to certainly a James Bond movie for. The Mission Impossible movies are a little bit better at just sort of accepting, okay, look, we're going to go some stupid, weird, fun places and just enjoy yourself. What I like about these Bollywood movies we're watching is that they don't spend a second on that stuff. They throw down a little bit of information that it sounds goofy even when it's being described, and then they just move on. Then they're all just dancing and singing and being fucking aggressively sexy. God, it makes me angry. And then they're on to the next. And then you're having fun with Ali, you know? And no, I don't think anyone leaves the theater going, well, I didn't like it because it wasn't realistic.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, obviously what this movie is inspired by and what it's drawing inspiration from is more like Mission Impossible, something like that, a spectacle action movie. But this one does lean a little bit more on the, like you mentioned, the character drama, the interrelations between our main characters and then the kind of the thief and his accomplice with Mr. A and Suneri. I think that that would not be, it's not something that you would see in a Western movie like this.
Oh, no way. You would get laughed on the page. The script would be thrown in the garbage because for the very things that we love the most. How amazing is the museum jewel theft scene where he's covered in white makeup and he's posing as a statue?
Oh, yeah.
It's the greatest thing ever. It's hilarious. It's funny. You see it and you're like, okay, I get what they're doing. They're paying off on the idea that he is a master of disguise and it looks weird and fun. And I just want to see it play out. And then he's got the little remote control car that actually does the thieving of the jewel. And it's like, this is amazing. Yes, it's ridiculous. Sure, it's stupid. But they give you just enough where it's following the pattern on the ground, so it's a little less noticeable, and you enjoy it. I mean, it's stuff like that an audience loves, and they don't need a tremendous amount of explanation.
No, and I agree. I mean, there's a scene towards the end of the movie, the final robbery, as it were, where they dress up like two of the seven dwarves. If you go into this movie knowing kind of where its head is at, I think you're going to have a good time. I will say that I think it's a little bit sillier than the first movie. I mean, these two scenes, I think, very much obvious points of reference that you could look at. Like, there's nobody dressing up as dwarves in the first movie. But I think what works is because this guy is a master of disguise, not just a motorcycle thief. I mean, that's the interesting thing here. The first movie is more Fast and the Furious. It really is. It leans heavily on motorcycle chases and car chases and gunplay. I mean, there is a fair amount of gunplay in the first movie, but this movie feels a lot more like Mission Impossible or, like Get Smart movie, not the TV show. I mean, again, it's things that are kind of adjacent to Mission Impossible.
Yeah. So Hrithik Roshan, is he like at the time in 2006? I keep forgetting these movies weren't made yesterday. They were made 16 years ago. Was he already famous? Like, did audiences know who he was when they came to see this movie? Was he like a special, like, oh, and they got this famous pop star or model or a person who exists in the public eye? Or was this like, nope, no one's ever seen him before in their lives?
No, he was a known quantity. He had already made Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, which is the movie I mentioned, KKKG, where he's opposite Amitabh. So Abhishek's father. And then he was also in Lakshya and Koi Mil Gaya, which is a movie where he plays a developmentally disabled young man. And it's not, and it's apparently it's very good. So it's very good or very bad, depending on who you talk to, I guess. So I have never seen it. But look, he's a really charismatic actor. He's also stacked. My God. I mean, the dude opens it. I mean, come on. He opens his shirt and you're like, he's not just a good actor. He's also a really good dancer.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's an amazing dancer. What's really funny is that whole opening sequence, is just introducing him when he, does that sort of skydive onto the top of the train, and then he dresses up as as an old British woman, which is
Queen
totally
Elizabeth
insane.
II, you mean?
Well, yes,
but it doesn't look like her at all.
No, for my money, it's just like, okay, old British woman, got it. And then when you realize that's where we are, and that's why that opening sequence is so important. It tells you everything you need to know, which is this is going to be over the top action. It's going to be insane heists. No, it is not 100% believable, but it's fucking fun, and you're going to have a good time. And even within that first few minutes, it's not making a ton of sense. It's like, well, is it important that he water ski on the sand behind the train for a while? I mean, do we need that? Is that part of the plan? But apparently it was. And then he jumps back on the train and, kicks that final guy's ass, whatever. But then he's the one who is singing the theme song to the second movie, Doom 2. Here we are, we're doing it again, more Doom, and I'm like, well, wait a second. He's not one of the guys from the first movie. So I guess he's just going to be sort of the guy for the second movie. All right, great.
And I think that it really works. Like, it's a really smart way to open the movie, is to just introduce your thief as the hero.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, there is a weird scene in the second half, and it's the Russian roulette scene. Okay.
It kind of comes out of nowhere.
It's so melodramatic. Like at a certain point, that was the only justification for it tonally that I could make. It's like, well, everything else is drawn pretty broadly, broad comedy, and sort of the partner of broad slapstick comedy in old drama is over the top melodrama. Big tears and, the shaking of fists and the gnashing of teeth. That's where that scene fit in. But I'm like, really? Are we really going here? We're going to go full on Russian roulette. And they kind of do. And that was the only scene where I'm like, this feels a little different. Like it's asking us to take emotions seriously on a level that we have not been asked to do yet in this movie.
And I guess we kind of aren't asked to do again until right at the end. It's weird. Those two scenes, they do kind of stick out. I appreciate that they're in the movie because it gives the film some stakes. Not that it didn't have any stakes, but it kind of doesn't have stakes. Again, when the hero is the villain and the villains are still heroes themselves, because again, you could just say that Abhishek and Uday Chopra's characters are the villains to the hero that Hrithik Roshan plays. You could make that case, I think, given how much he's in the movie. But I think it's weird. I think it's weird that those scenes are in the movie, but it works. But also that the Russian roulette scene is tonally strange, only because are we trying to paint Hrithik Roshan's character negatively all of a sudden?
Yeah, I think that was it. That suddenly I'm like, oh, this is a little like I don't know if I like him for doing this and forcing her to play Russian roulette. I don't know if I like him. I don't know if I like her for going along with it.
And she's willing to kill herself too.
Well, then here's the funny thing: is that they're not playing it like in a lot of movies you and I have seen. The undercover cop someone will stick a gun in his hand and go, okay, you go in that room and blow that guy's head off. And then the question is, oh, but he's a cop. Now he doesn't want to blow his cover. Is he going to go so far as to murder someone just to further inculcate himself and bolster his cred as a criminal for the ultimate goal? We always have that scene. But now they don't play it that way here. They're not saying how far will she go to keep her cover and to convince Mr. Aryan, that she is on his side. You really get the feeling like she's half in love with him, and what she is doing is based on her emotional devotion to this guy. You know what I mean? So it's purely emotional. We're not watching it like from a, strategic point of view.
Well, and at that point he knows that she's with the cops. I mean, that's right. The whole kind of onus for that scene is, I know that you are not here of your own volition. You are here as the plant to turn on me. But in the same breath, you have now fallen in love with me. And so what does that mean for this relationship? I mean, he kind of talks about that to her.
Right. And he's fallen in love with her too. I mean, it feels like it's both ways. So it's like
it's reciprocal completely.
Yeah. Prove your love to me by playing Russian roulette, and then they sort of go in this weird area of it's either do you love me enough to kill me, or do you love me enough to kill yourself, or something? It's like,
I think it's the first one. I believe it's the first one, but she does the second one in that initial scene, because then they echo it in the second scene.
Yeah, they're like shooting at each other, and then she goes to kill herself, and it doesn't work. And I don't know. It got a little grim, but by the end, I'm like, well, okay. So all of which is to say, she's in love, because she's the only thing you're tracking in this movie beyond the plot of, will Jay catch Mr. A? The only other thing you're watching is, what is she going to do? She's the only character in the whole movie who has a decision to make.
Right.
And then she makes it. And they double back, like they kind of twist at the end where you're like, oh, maybe she did. Maybe at the last minute she decided she's going for her own freedom. And then they resolve that in a final scene, which I loved. But again, if you were studying this in a film class and you had to write your midterm, she's the main character of the movie, because she's the only one who makes a decision.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, everybody else is pretty much set on their courses. I mean, Abhishek Bachchan and Uday Chopra really are supporting characters, which is so crazy. That's not the way you would make this movie.
Well, which is
in a Western context, right? But yet I think it's so smart to do it this way, because I don't know how much more I need of either one of them in a leading capacity. And frankly, Hrithik Roshan, I think, is so charismatic that you kind of forget how charismatic the other two actors are, because they're just as charismatic as he is. It's just everybody else is taking a backseat to the Hrithik Roshan and Aishwarya Rai relationship, which is so smart. Like, you don't make this movie this way as an American filmmaker. This goes almost against why you're making this movie as a sequel to begin with. Right? Yeah.
And, and Jay's character is so kind of, in a way, one note. I mean, he's very,
he's become so in the last, in between the movies, which I guess that was one of the things that I had an issue with. It's like he almost was like the character he was at the beginning of the last movie.
Yeah. He becomes very almost grumpy, he's just very, stern, and then, Ali is, so much the opposite. He's so big and so frenetic, which is great and super enjoyable. And he's just as funny and engaging in this film as he was in the first one. But yeah, Jay gets a little like, okay, I get it. You're a dog with a bone. You're going to hunt this guy down. That's all you care about. And there really isn't a lot else going on with your character. In fact, the only thing he kind of comes alive for are the scenes he has with Hrithik. And almost to the point, because those scenes are so charged with a certain homoerotic energy, you're almost going, wow, he kind of loves Mr. A. There's something going on here that is beyond just cops and robbers. It's almost like, you're super hot, you're a great thief. Maybe we could just, punch out for a while. I won't be a cop, you won't be a criminal, and we could just hang out in Rio for a while and see what happens.
Well, and I actually 100% agree with you. I mean, that's the thing that is, for me, one of the more entertaining aspects of the movie is there is that going on. Right. But totally. I like this. Yeah. I do like this kind of deconstruction and boiling down of that relationship between the cops and the criminals, at least in this aspect, in this context. It's, you enjoy chasing me as much as I enjoy running.
Yeah. Yeah. There is this weird sort of seductive, dance going on between them. And it is funny because American movies they never tip the homoerotic hand. That's the business of the audience member to read into it or not read into it as much as they want to or do not want to. But here it's a lot more evident that it's like, hey, we're both really hot movie stars. Why waste this on a chick? let's go.
It kind of verges on what they talk about with something like Batman and the Joker, right? It's like, I need you as much as you need me. Without me, there is no you, or without me, there is no me. I like that they do touch on that. I would have preferred there to be more scenes between the two of them, between Hrithik and Abhishek. I would have preferred that. I mean, I know why they don't, because again, the fact that they have 2 or 3 is enough, but I would have preferred more, because it was the moment when Abhishek Bachchan really kind of rose to the occasion. Not saying he's sleeping through this movie, but they don't give him a lot to do intentionally.
Yeah, he seems a little over Uday. He's kind of like, yeah, okay, I get it. You're the funny one. I'm the boring one. Okay, whatever. Like, it's sort of like, yeah, you're here, but I'm annoyed with you. Not so with the other guy. What I love is that final scene, though. They really wrap it up. I think the resolution of the movie is so great, up to and including the 6-month break, because it allows everyone to kind of walk out of the theater feeling good. It's like, okay, great. Hrithik, or Aryan gets together with Suneri. They're together. It's a real relationship. Yes, our cop, Jay, is super smart. He tracks them down, but he tracks them down and watches them for 6 months, and there's no crime. They're just running a beachfront cafe. So he's sort of like, okay, I'm here to tell you, I know what you're up to. I'm smarter than you. I will always find you. But you seem to have given up your life of crime. And as long as you just run this little cafe, I'm happy to walk away. And that's how it resolves. And you're like, that's perfect. That's great. That's all I need. People aren't dead. People aren't murderers. Everyone's happy. They figured it out somehow. Somehow that scene at the top of the waterfall was anticipated and planned for by our 2 romantic leads. I don't know what they did, if she was shooting blanks or if he had on some sort of weird Kevlar vest underneath his non-existent shirt.
I think he had squibs. That's what my interpretation was, the way he was reacting to being shot.
Right. So
it was like blanks. Over the top. He's selling it big time. Yeah. And not like in a bad way, but like when you see that scene after the fact, it kind of reinforms the climactic scene at the waterfall.
Well, not only that, but there's that other scene where they're at the top of the dam or the cliff or whatever, and he says, if you trust me, jump. And then she does, and he jumps, and he hooks the bungee cord or whatever onto her mid-fall, which is terrific. But it's almost like that scene exists for the viewer who's going, I don't get how he survived at the end. And it's like, oh, well, maybe after he jumped secretly, somehow, he had a bungee cord that we just didn't see, running, connected to his foot or something. And that's how he did it, because we saw him do something kind of like it before. So we'll just believe that's what's going on.
Well, and the other thing is, if you think about it in the context of the first film, it almost feels like a do-over of the first movie in a lot of ways. Like the climax of this movie, you have the characters confronting the villain at a waterfall. You have him going over the edge. And in the other, we talked about it the last time we talked about Dhoom. I was sure that he was going to survive and come back as the villain in this movie, because that's what I've been conditioned to do as a Western film goer, is if they're going to make a sequel, they're going to bring back at least the heroes and probably the villain as well. Nope. But in this movie, they do that. No, I know for a fact the character of Mr. 8 has not come back in the third one. The villain in the third one is played by Amir Khan, who is a massive actor in his own right. But it's interesting. This movie is almost like you could pitch this as Dhoom 1. Like, you know what I mean? Like Dhoom 1 exists as kind of the prequel story to Jay and Ali's relationship, but you don't need it to enjoy this movie at all.
Right, because there's no specific element of the narrative that is important enough to the viewer who want to see it continued.
Right.
You don't need the exact story. You just need the parts and the pieces and the people. You just need to know, okay, Ali and Jay will be back. There'll be a big crime. There'll be a bunch of action sequences. There'll be a bunch of dance sequences. And they're going to be playing essentially the same characters. There'll be a new bad guy, and they'll either dial him up or dial him down in terms of threat, violence, homicidal tendencies, whatever. And there'll be a couple of beautiful women who play integral roles in both stories, just the cop story and the bad guy story, and then we're good. And that's all you need. And as long as we have those elements, the exact story that's being told matters not at all.
I agree. And that for me is why I really feel like, yes, this is a sequel to the first movie, but in a lot of ways it stands alone as its own thing. And yeah, the first movie informs me about some of the decisions and why the characters are the way that they are. But I think this movie does a good enough job on its own in that first 15, 20 minutes of reintroducing the characters to people that may not know who they are to begin with. And again, is Abhishek Bachchan written a little flat in this movie? Sure. But he's, again, ostensibly the film's villain in a lot of ways. Like, that's the way he's written is written as a villain, sort of. Yeah. A villain as in the cop chasing after our thief, not that he's a bad guy. That's the thing. There isn't this in the Ocean's movies. In the Ocean's 11 movies, there's not a cop that's chasing after them throughout the movies.
But no, there really isn't. That'd be great, though. There should be. Why isn't there?
I don't know. And that for me is kind of what this movie has that those movies don't, which is that interplay between the thieves and the cops and what that means and where do you stand and side and where is the movie trying to get you to side? Because the movie's pushing you in a direction, clearly, of who you're supposed to sympathize with in this movie. From the amount of time that they give to Hrithik Roshan to the way Abhishek's character is written. It's all being done in a very calculated way to make you fall in love with the leads, are Aishwarya Rai and Hrithik Roshan, and almost everything else is unimportant.
So there was a minute there where we were going to watch 2 and 3. And then talk about them both at the same time. And then we're like, oh, they're kind of long. Let's just
they're kind of long. 3 hours apiece.
Yeah. But you have not gone ahead and watched 3 yet, have you? Okay.
No.
All right. So we don't know. I can guess. Okay, so here's my guess then. Okay, having not seen it, here's my guess. Because it ends with Ali and Manali getting together. And it's like, oh, it looks like, they're still together. 6 months later, they're still in a relationship. So it's like, oh, things are going great. So now the question is, when 3 begins, is he still with her? Or has there been a reshuffle and it's like, oh no, she had to leave, or we broke up, or she decided she didn't like me anymore. And now I'm back to being the guy who was always talking to mommy up in heaven, hoping for a woman so my fantasy of getting married and having a bunch of kids will play out. Do we reset him, or do we come back and he's in a relationship with that actress? They're married, they have kids, and now he's being pulled away from that family to join Jay on the next mission. Now, at the end of this movie, Jay says, we've already got our next job. So does he pull him away in that moment? Does it really happen right away? I mean, I don't know. But because nothing matters, I feel like we should make a bet.
Well, that's why I honestly think the next movie will have the two of them further removed from the story. I think that they'll be like the equivalent of like the bosses of the people doing the investigating.
Oh my God, really? Like, I think that's on the hunt?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, again, this movie kind of already does that with their characters. It takes the 2 characters that were our leads in the last movie and removes them a little bit. They're still chasing after them, but in the reverse of the last movie, I wonder if in the final movie, it will be a further removing of them to like a official boss capacity. And there are people that they're interacting with and they have to go out at the end with everybody. Like, I don't know. Again, like this movie has kind of shown the pre-established characters and their importance to the story aren't necessarily what's driving us as filmmakers to create a sequel.
Well, so how many Dhoom movies are there?
3.
Oh, there's only 3. It's not like
3.
Fast and the Furious where there's 10 or something.
No.
Okay. Well, then my guess is they're still central. They're still the 2, Ali and Jay are the 2 main cops. That's what I predict. And then I will further predict that the relationship does not maintain between Manali and Ali. That he's pulled away from her, and we see no more of that character. And maybe there's some romantic complication where some girl falls in love with him and he's like, oh my gosh, should I be true to Manali or do I go with this new girl? But I'm going to bet that it picks up right away and he is pulled away from the happiness of being in a relationship to being back on the job. And we go from there. And they are the two main cops. That's going to be my guess.
And see, the thing is, like, we were already essentially completely wrong about this movie the last time we did it. It was like completely wrong, which is really funny because what informed my prediction and your prediction just now, like your prediction now is more informed than it would have been last time going into this movie because we've seen this movie now, but it's wild to me how much of a backseat our main characters from the first movie take in this movie because they're like, that's even in the Western media that does that, say something like, oh, I don't know. I mean, you could, let's just, using a very contemporary example, Spider-Man No Way Home, right? It has a main character of another movie in it. It has Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, right? But he's playing a supporting role in that movie. That movie, if that had been this movie, would have been advertised as a Doctor Strange movie, but Spider-Man is the lead. That's the way this movie, you know what I mean? This movie is advertised as their movie, but the thief is the main character throughout. And I would not have ever anticipated that going into this movie at all. That's not a thing.
Beyond being a cop as his profession, there's no feeling. It's not like we're not checking in with Jay's boss going, if you don't solve this, you're fired, or we suspect that you're in on it with him. I mean, it's just another case. It's just, he's the guy, dog with a bone. He's going to do his job. And it's like, okay, whatever. And Ali is basically there to help him because he's still a little bit on the hook. It's like, I kind of have to, or you're going to lock me up or something. So, that's my guess for Doom 3. I'm totally up for watching Doom 3 whenever you want. Whenever we got to pick up the mics again and talk about Doom, I'm ready. I'm ready.
So as we bring this episode to a close, I'm curious, since we've kind of talked around it, but haven't really talked about it specifically, what did you think of the action set pieces? I
thought they were good. I wasn't as blown away. I was somehow the themes were showing a little bit, I was sort of like, oh, okay, that's okay. I get the concept of what they're doing, but it doesn't look as convincing. I'm not gasping. I can sort of tell that there's a green screen, behind them in a lot of shots, and that it's not their faces in various. It's like, well, okay, that's fine. So I was a little underwhelmed with the execution, although I think the concept of the action sequences were all really fun. The heists and then the chases afterward was all great. And then, but the musical numbers, fantastic. I could watch them all day.
Well, and to talk about the action scenes, like you've clearly mentioned, is one thing, but the musical numbers in this movie, just again, that for me, again, everybody always talks about, oh, Indian cinema has music in it. Yeah, it does. And what's kind of wild is there's plenty of Indian cinema that's come out more contemporarily that doesn't have it at all. And I've watched some of those movies and they work too. It doesn't require it. It's not a requirement. It's like somebody smacking you on the hand if you don't add musical numbers to your film, but it's such a welcome kind of palate cleanser.
Yeah.
I don't know, like it does something for me when I watch these movies where it gives me an opportunity to kind of just not forget the movie, but kind of just have a fun little moment with the characters.
Well, what it does, when you were talking earlier about how Western films will have downtime to let you catch your breath before the next big action sequence. In a weird way, that's what this does. It's a tonal reset, and it resets you not into the real world, but into a world that is even more heightened than the world where the action takes place. So you're watching, and it's the movie repeatedly telling you, we're just here to have fun. Even when people are getting shot at, don't worry, because the ultimate world this movie exists in is a formal creation that does not touch on your life when you leave the theater. And I think that's great. I find that is something that again, Western movies like the James Bond movies used to have. In fact, I think most movies used to be pretty okay with saying, we're a movie, so don't get too bent out of shape. It's a movie. Have a good time, eat some popcorn, get the fuck out. Now everything is, trying to, convince you that it's great art and it's important and don't have too much fun.
Why should we feel embarrassed to be entertained by a movie? Why should a
I
filmmaker
don't
feel like
know.
they're not allowed to entertain the audience? That's what I don't get. Like, you work in the industry and you've seen this trend, and you were and are still writing. You knew what led that charge. It was shit being successful, like the Nolan Batman movies. Those
Yeah,
Nolan Batman movies were so successful that they created a cottage industry of taking the things that you love that are bombastic and over the top and draining them of all of their, I won't say life, because I don't want to besmirch all the people that made these movies entirely, but you're draining it of, at least for me, the fun, the excitement. I don't watch an action movie and go, how many bullets did he have in that gun? Count the bullets that he shot.
right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
look,
yeah,
the amount of bullets in a gun only matters at one point, when
yeah.
the action is slowed down and one character is pointing a gun at the other one and it clicks. That's the only time gun ammo amount ever matters, is when they're running out or if they don't have enough. It never matters otherwise, and it shouldn't. It's a fucking movie. But at the
Well,
same time, those Christopher Nolan Batman movies ushered in a period of time, and I think we're finally, maybe, hopefully, at the tail end of it, where the big budget tentpole movies of the summer, outside of superhero movies, mind you, have to be grounded in reality and realistic, and there have to be real world stakes. And James Bond is trying to take down the guy who stole the knock list of the spy names, and it's like, oh, like you're making this
yeah.
so boring and frankly,
Well,
fucking pedestrian, because real life ain't that exciting. Real life ain't that fun. Like, like.
Well, I think there's been a trade-off, because I think if you go back to, say, the 70s, there was a little bit of an attempt in horror films, like The Exorcist, for example, to make them very realistic. So like everything in the movie The Exorcist feels like it's just like a real movie with real people.
It's like a
And then
documentary in a lot of the best moments.
yeah, like oh, we're just like, these are people that are living in Washington D.C. and this is what's happening. And then this really weird, scary stuff, but all that real stuff made the scary stuff feel realer. Now, the trend in horror films right now has now gone the other way. Now it's more like The Conjuring, where they're not, they sort of nod to real life, but really you're watching a movie the entire time. And the question is, how effectively are they scaring you, either with the quality of the computer generated effects or just the filmmaking in and of itself? Again, the sound design and editing to give you a jump scare. But like movies like The Conjuring and a lot of that sort of Blumhouse stuff, those don't feel realistic at all. Like no time is spent trying to lull you into the sense that, oh, this is my world. It's just like, here's mom, here's dad, here's the kid. Oh my God. And then you're off to the races. So there's been this weird trade-off where now the burden is being carried, the burden of realism, by action movies, and it's just, it makes them no fun. So I say, let's get back to the fun. So like the only thing that's allowed to be fun now really are the Marvel movies, and even those can take themselves a bit seriously. And then broad comedies, those are still allowed to be, a movie. Bad Boys can still be a Michael Bay movie, and you're watching a movie.
And I'm just not a fan of it, because it excludes Western and American filmmakers from making movies like this one, like Dhoom 2. A movie like this should be made in some capacity for Westerners in some way, because we don't have movies that are fun like this anymore. We really don't. I mean, I'm not saying they're all gone, but the sense of having fun with an action movie, just you're not allowed to say one-liners anymore. Like, oh my God, like what is your fucking problem? Like, and you know what? I appreciate that there are people that like that. I appreciate that there are people who yearn for that at their movies. Could Thanos have actually, would he be able to snap with that Infinity Gauntlet? Like, what? Who are these people that are asking these literal questions, and why are they getting so much attention from people? Is my question. It's like you said, it's a movie, it's entertainment. It doesn't even necessarily have to be considering itself art. You might consider it art, but it might not consider itself art.
It's just, we're not used to it. We're not used to that kind of filmmaking. But if one person does it, if one person makes a movie, that's on Netflix or that gets released, and the whole point of it is, oh, they're just going out there. It's like, it's an action movie, it's a musical, it's all that stuff. If you just take, now we'll steal it back from Bollywood. Bollywood, stealing, elements of Western narrative and throwing everything into the same pot and serving it up. What if someone just steals it back and says, okay, but now we're going to take it back and we're going to do that. And it's going to be Ryan Reynolds and whoever, but they're going to sing and dance. And they're going to shoot guns and there's going to be crazy action. And we're not going to apologize for it within the movie. We're going to play it straight within the movie that, yeah, we're doing all these things. And it's not a parody of Bollywood and it's not a satire. We're actually going to try to hit the entertainment value that these movies are hitting out of the park every single time.
Well, and that's the thing, you're totally right about. If they were to try to make a movie like Dhoom or a movie inspired by Dhoom 1 or 2, they would have a scene where there's a character going, oh no, they're breaking into song again. And there's none of that here. There's never any of that. There might be some of that in Indian cinema that I have not seen yet, where they're kind of like, oh, hanging a lantern on it, which could be funny. I mean, that there could be something to be mined from that, of characters being cognizant of it. But that's the way it would be played in American cinema. You'd have Ryan Reynolds going, oh, they're breaking into song again. And it's like, in this, you can't. You have to play it straight.
And with this level of performance and filmmaking, who cares? When they break into a dance number, you're enthralled. It's 10 times better than the best Super Bowl halftime show you've ever seen. And what's to complain? It's not boring. It's not a ballad. It's just, and now we're going to have some fun and have a lot of really hot people do some great dancing. Shut up.
Right. And that's where I am in the exact same spot. That's for me, we've talked about it, and I think I've said it on almost every episode of this show that I've done. The sense of joy, an unbridled passion that comes through in these movies is apparent. The love of filmmaking, it doesn't feel as, and again, it probably is, we're just Westerners viewing it through our lens. There probably is a massive dose of cynicism to a lot of these movies, just like there is in our entertainment industry, because again, people get jaded and all of that. But the way it comes across on screen, not that at all. Not that at all. By the end of this movie, I was 100% on board with whatever the third one is, but also completely enthralled by how much fun this movie was, because this movie has fun, and that sense of fun that the movie is having is translated very clearly to the audience. And that's not a thing Western films, just not action movies, just don't have that anymore. I don't go watch a movie like Commando anymore, or even Terminator 2, frankly. That was when it was again, hasta la vista, baby. Like that became part of the pop culture zeitgeist of the time. Like that's ingrained in pop culture now. But even then, we don't have that anymore because you're not allowed to have fun, I guess. And like you said, even with Marvel, they stop themselves from having fun plenty.
Yeah. Well, but look, things change. Things change in American cinema. They're clearly changing in Bollywood cinema. And so we'll see. See if we're having the same conversation in 10 years. You and I probably will be having the same conversation.
Right. Well, and again, that's the thing about this movie and Dhoom 1. And again, we don't know yet with Dhoom 3. It's, as someone who didn't grow up with these movies, but is coming to them now as an adult to appreciate them, like you, like myself, it feels like just opening up a treasure chest full of the greatest gold that everybody else has already touched, and you're just getting to look at and play with. You're getting to see and play with somebody else's toys out of their toy box. That's what this feels like. I'm angry at myself that it's 2022 and I'm just now seeing this movie.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And that, I think, for me, is the biggest takeaway. So final thoughts, Richard, on Dhoom 2.
Even better than Dhoom 1. Can't wait for Dhoom 3.
Same. I'm right there with you. I am excited to see what Dhoom 3 brings. I have heard from people, my friends that I went to high school with, who I am still very close with. I have heard that Dhoom 3 is not great, but I have heard, but they really liked Dhoom 2. So
all right,
there you go. I think
we'll find out.
I think they all agreed that this movie's better than Dhoom 1, but yeah, I don't know how you could watch Dhoom 1 and like it more. Just Hrithik Roshan in this movie, just everything about him. That other movie doesn't have Hrithik Roshan in it. There you go. Yeah, that's it. So the next time, Richard, that you're joining me, we're probably going to be talking about Dhoom 3. But until then, where can people find you should they be wanting to look?
Well, like you said, on HBO Max, you can watch Titans. They've got seasons 1, 2, and 3 in their entirety. And since we're recording right now in late November, I believe the first half of season 4 has aired. And now we're going to take a break, and I'm not sure when we're coming back, but we have 6 more episodes in season 4, part 2, and that'll be sometime in 2023. So catch up over the holidays, check out Titans, and then in the new year, we'll have 6 more to close out season 4.
As for me, you can find me over at weirdingwaymedia.com, which is the podcast network that Mike White of the Projection Booth and I have set up so that we can have a place for all the things that we work on both together and separately, including this show and a whole host of other shows, including, but not limited to, the Culture Cast, the Projection Booth, Scary Stories We Tell, Twisted and Uncorked, and a little show that you may have heard of, or not, that features Richard's wife, Susan Lambert Haddam, 80s TV Ladies, which she and her co-host Sharon host every other week, talking about TV shows from the 80s featuring, you guessed it, ladies. Richard, you like that show. You're on that show, aren't you?
I've been on a few times, but I told Susan, it's like, I got to back off. I'm just this annoying male voice, going.
Soon it'll be 80s TV Ladies with Richard Haddam.
Yeah, it's like when I hear it, it's like there's a cigar on my mouth, and I'm like, all right, Toots, let me tell you how Hollywood really works. And I'm like, oh God, shut up. I'm sure all listeners say that when they hear my voice on anything. But anyway, I was on a couple early episodes, and now I'm really not on anymore because now they're interviewing amazing people. So tune in for celebrity interviews and fun talk about, all your favorite shows from the 80s.
And yeah, as for this show, BollywoodCinemaClub.com, no social media, not yet, or maybe there will be, who knows? Social media sucks, and we're seeing the downfall of it in real time, which is fun. Thanks, social media, for providing a way for us to watch your own death. And yeah, the next time you hear one of these episodes with Richard, it will be Dhoom 3, and until then, we'll catch you on the next episode.